To make sure you never miss out on an episode, remember to subscribe and turn on notifications. And now, let's get on to some random Star Wars.
Hello there.
I don't think there's really been anything in modern Star Wars that's been as divisive as the last numbered film, The Last Jedi. And it's really up to debate, as it is debated, as to how the film has its merits, where it has its faults. Those are things I'm not going to go into so much, and what I feel about it, beyond the fact that I enjoyed the film when I watched it and I left the cinema. I wasn't left with a feeling of, oh wow, like I have been with some films. It was more of a case of, as in, this is a film that would give us a lot to think about in the future. And some of the real places where I might point fault with the filmmakers is possibly their reactions to the criticism, but that is a debate for another time. But one of the aspects of it which has confused some people or upset some people, including Mark Hamill himself, is the direction that they took Luke Skywalker in. His Luke Skywalker, the enthusiastic hero of the original trilogy, the guy who saw before anyone else could that Darth Vader could be redeemed, that he would, once his own apprentice had turned dark, he would just give up and go into exile and close himself from the Force. And a lot of people thought that was very un-Luke, as in for him to turn that way. And looking at that, how you expect Luke to be regarding what you see in the original trilogy, even slightly older and wiser Luke at the end of Return of the Jedi, yes, it is very not like him. But however, it's one of these things where it's a bit of a complex subject, and there's not really and a lot of stuff's happened to Luke to make him actually act the way he did, and there are some things that didn't happen. So, I mean, the closest example that people put into place is the comparison between Luke in exile and Obi Wan in exile. So those are two things to be compared, but they both have some things they both have in common. Is the fact that they had an apprentice that went dark. And the real world way you could look at this is they'd both known these apprentices as children. In case of Luke, he has literally known Ben all his life, and he's literally his family. So if you look at a real well way of looking at this is, say you've grown up with a child, knowing a child, and they suddenly turn out to be a mass murderer. How do you feel about that? And take into account that you have trained this child in some way. You've given them some abilities or ideas that could actually lead to them doing this. How would this devastate you? Another example in fiction I can think of is from the TV show Dexter, when the protagonist's father in his past realized what he was, and tried to as a thought, almost as a bit of a thought experiment, or not truly realizing where this would go, taught him methods of how to only really kill criminals or murderers, and that way using those instincts to do some kind of good in the world. And when he actually followed through with it, his father became so devastated that and so guilt-ridden, he took his own life. In the case of Obi Wan, it's a case that he knew Anakin ever since he was a small boy, trained him to how he is the best of his knowledge and his abilities, or what rules he was able to go by at the time, and as we know with Star Wars, what Anakin did. And his words to Anakin were, "I failed you." In the case, and so he then went into, as we know, went into hiding to partly protect his own life, but also to guard one of Anakin's children, his son Luke. And this is a qualifying factor that I think helped Obi-Wan stay grounded and to not collapse into constant self-pity or just completely realize that everything he's held true is to be wrong, like Luke did. The fact that he had a goal and a purpose, he had he had some kind of tangible hope to hold on to in the future, that things went bad with Anakin. However, things may improve with in the future with his son. With Luke, it cuts a bit deeper, because not only did he train an apprentice that he felt he had failed in maybe not providing proper training, and the fact that, and for that then apprentice to go and do terrible things, the fact that Luke actually felt like he had done something to actually propel that. His moment of thinking of turning his lightsaber on to end this before it even properly started, and then the shame of that because Ben's decision had not been made yet, but Ben noticing that, his fear led him to create what was really, you could consider like a preemptive strike, and that he felt is what created Kylo Ren. And again, try and imagine the self crisis that would come from that. The fact that you felt that you have doomed the galaxy, and also the life of somebody that you have loved all his life, as an uncle would, having that on your conscience, and the fact that you probably didn't have a great deal of 100% faith in the Jedi in the first place, because let's face it, one of your masters, Obi Wan, lied to you about certain aspects of the Force and your own life. You can easily see that there's no hope. I mean, Obi Wan gave up on Anakin, as is clear from that, from what he said in the films, and from that episode of Rebels, where he ended up finally confronting Maul, where he believed Luke was in fact the chosen one and not Anakin. And people will bring up the fact that if Luke could see that Vader could be redeemed, then why could he not see that Ben or Kylo Ren by this point could be redeemed? Well, it's a matter of he was too close to the situation. Obi-Wan had given up on Anakin because he had seen what he'd become, and all he saw was his failure. And the times he did encounter Anakin, first on Mustafar and later on the Death Star, he was all he sensed from Anakin was rage, anger, betrayal, and hatred, and he was not able to see past that wall, because he maybe wasn't part of it, wasn't willing to, and also Vader maybe wasn't. The negative emotions towards Obi-Wan was all that Anakin. It was the most powerful emotion, and it was all that Anakin was letting show. However, when Luke encounters Anakin, or Vader, whichever way you want to call him, Vader didn't hate Luke. He probably found Luke quite intriguing, and there's also the fact of he'd realized through Luke's existence, he'd realized that Palpatine had actually lied to him, and so Luke was able to see past any some darkness, and the fact that that his feelings towards Luke would be different to what his feelings would be to Obi Wan, and he would be able to actually see what was underlying, where there was still part of Anakin left. Now, when it came to the whole situation of Kylo Ren and Luke, he was in the same position as Obi Wan. He felt he all he's at first all he saw was his own sense of disappointment, his own guilt, and Kylo Ren's grown enlarged hatred towards Luke because of what he'd done to him or what he thought Luke was planning to do to him. So he was not able to see, like Obi-Wan, he was not able to see past that. Rey, on the other hand, did not have that same experience. She was in the position that Luke was all those years ago, where Kylo Ren did not hate Rey. In fact, Kylo Ren probably considered Rey the only person in the galaxy who was able to actually understand him. And maybe Vader maybe even felt the same way a little bit towards Luke. So that's why, and towards the end, maybe Luke, when he'd actually he'd force projected onto Ahch-to, by that point, maybe he'd realised that maybe Ben or Kylo Ren wasn't beyond redemption. It's just he couldn't be redeemed by Luke. He's maybe learnt from his mistake that the person who had hurt the apprentice cannot be the one to save them. It has to be the external, newer person, like how Luke was to Vader. This is why I think his outlook on Ahch-to had changed. It was more positive, and he said said to Leia that he could not save Ben, but he did not explicitly state that nobody could. And if in the future, in episode 9, Kylo Ren is to be redeemed and properly come back to Ben Skywalker, it will be through Rey. But you could argue that this argument has already been tried to be played out in episode 8 in The Last Jedi. So I'd be very interested to hear what you think about this theory, whether I'm full of it or if you agree with it or if you think I may have a bit of a point. As always, try and keep the comments respectful, and please like and share this, and I will look forward to seeing you next week with my next random Star Wars theory.